A rival mafia boss just pulled a syringe on the wrong woman. Imagine having a romantic dinner with your billionaire boss, only for him to step out, leaving you alone with a ruthless cartel leader. Dante Calabrese thought he could easily drug and kidnap Stella to get to Sebastian Ricci. He didn't expect her to smash a champagne bottle at his head. And he definitely didn't expect the city's deadliest kingpin to walk back in, ready to start a bloodbath. Let me set the scene for you, so we can witness exactly whether this tragedy takes root. The air inside Sebastian Ricci's office is suffocating, thick with the scent of aged leather and untouched whiskey. It hangs there like a heavy, permanent fog. For Stella, that intoxicating aroma is the very essence of terrifying power, the scent of the ruthless boss she is doomed to love. For 3 years, the frantic clatter of her keyboard has been her only anchor in the storm of his empire. Beyond his oak door, a fake corporate world hums an innocent tune. But inside these soundproofed walls, a much darker beast breathes. It is a harsh truth of life that the most poisonous environments know exactly how to disguise themselves as the safest harbors we will ever find. Stella's eyes drift to the clock on a desk, watching the numbers coldly shift to 6:47 in the evening. The rest of the floor evacuated an hour ago, fleeing the crushing pressure of this building. Yet Stella remains rooted in her chair. She waits in the shadows, praying his dark gaze might finally see through the woman beneath the assistant. A harsh buzz from the intercom shatters the silence. His voice bleeds through the speaker, a gritty Italian rumble making her ordinary name sound like a dangerous prayer. "Bring the revised contract," he commands. Right away, she replies, fighting to mask the violent hammering in her chest. Life teaches us early on to never let them see you tremble, especially when your heart is desperately beating and against the cage of your ribs. You and I need to pause and examine the tragic history haunting these two. He told her once during a fragile midnight hour when exhaustion stripped away his iron defenses that her name meant stars. He had studied her across his massive desk with a burning intensity that set her skin on fire. But a ringing phone shattered the illusion, and the stubborn king never spoke of it again. Now, she gathers her files, her trembling hands smoothing down her navy girt in a nervous ritual. Her silk blouse is perfectly buttoned. In Sebastian's cutthroat reality, a single sloppy detail is a fatal flaw, and he misses nothing. This harsh reality proves that paying obsessive attention to the smallest details is often the only thing keeping you alive in a dangerous world. The oak door is already cracked open as she steps into the lion's den. She knocks twice, treating the sound like a solemn ritual, and enters the moment his sharp voice barks a command. Sebastian sits behind his desk like a ruthless monarch on a shadowed throne, a masterpiece of sharp angles and tightly coiled violence. At 38, he is in his prime. His dark hair is slicked back from a face carved from cold, unforgiving marble. His charcoal suit wraps around shoulders built to carry a criminal empire. But it is his eyes that undo her completely pitch-black pools, holding lethal danger and secrets she desperately craves. Let this be a lesson for us all. Sometimes the exact thing that terrifies us to our core is the one thing we cannot stop ourselves from blindly chasing. Stella lowers the Moretti contract onto his desk, her breath caught, terrified of disrupting his obsessively aligned universe. Everything in Sebastian's orbit demands perfect order, and she has sacrificed 3 years to become the invisible glue holding it together. He does not even grant her a glance. Thus, the gold nib of his antique pen scratches the paper with deadly precision. "Cancel my morning meetings," he dictates, his tone entirely hollow. Then He blindly orders her to confirm his dinner reservations for tomorrow night at 8 at Il Giardino. It is the city's elite restaurant, the glittering stage where he parades his beautiful, vacant women. Please remember to always know your worth. Waiting in the shadows for someone to finally realize your value is a deeply tragic way to waste your life. At the mention of that restaurant, her stomach drops into a sickening knot. The women he takes to Il Giardino look nothing like her. They are draped in custom silks, arms with hollow smiles. For two, she asks, wrestling her voice into professional neutrality while her throat feels lined with broken glass. Sebastian pauses. The expensive pen hovers silently above the contract. No, he murmurs softly, the shadows shifting across his face. Cancel it entirely. A dizzying rush of relief and total confusion floods her veins. When she confirms the cancellation, the Mafia king slowly raises his head. The crushing weight of his unblinking stare strikes her chest like a physical blow. How long have you worked for me? He demands. Take note of this truth. The deepest cuts in life never come from a blade, but from a single, heavy look. 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days, she replies. A miserable flush burns her neck, shamed by how desperately her soul has counted every second in his presence. A wild, untamed flicker breaks across his pitch black eyes, vanishing before she can decipher its meaning. He asks if he has ever given her a reason to doubt his judgment. Never, she breathes quietly. Then trust me, he says, his voice thick with hidden agony, and accept Seth's invitation. The words hit her like a derailed train. Seth Donovan is his oldest friend, the lethal enforcer who just asked her out. Sebastian's jaw clamps down. Fighting a violent inner war, he refuses to explain. Here is a classic life lesson. When a powerful man tries to force you into the arms of his closest friend, something intensely dark is brewing just beneath the surface. Stella S. mind reels, struggling to decode this deeply twisted brand of mafia logic. She informs him, her tone painfully polite, that a dinner date is a personal choice, not a professional duty. Sebastian coldly ignores her rebellion, dropping his severe gaze back to the paperwork. He morphs the suggestion into a direct order, erasing her autonomy in one cruel breath. Seth is a good man, he insists, painting him as loyal by their blood-soaked standards. Every word is violently measured, striking her like a calculated blow. He claims she worked too hard, and deserves a nice evening out. A white-hot anger ignites in her chest. After 3 years of bleeding for me, he is casually handing her off. Never let anyone treat your hard-earned loyalty like a temporary inconvenience to be managed. The agonizing sting of his rejection pushes her wounded pride to strike back. She thanks him, her voice dripping with venom, for managing her pathetic social life. With reckless sarcasm, she asks if she should block out the mandated date on the office calendar. Sebastian's snap up, a terrible, lethal darkness eclipsing his gaze. Careful, Miss Romano, he warns, his voice vibrating in a terrifying rumble. The invisible glass slams back into place between them. Stella forces her spine straight, refusing to let him witness the humiliating tears burning her eyes. She coldly asks if that will be all. You are dismissed, he clips out, his tone like shattering ice. She pivots on her heel, carrying away every shred of dignity she has left. Always keep your chin high, even when your heart is fracturing inside your chest. Escaping back to her lonely desk, Stella collapses with cadence into her chair, pressing trembling palms flat against the wood to anchor her a spinning reality. Her phone suddenly vibrates a message from Seth, eagerly hunting for her answer. The hulking enforcer promises her excellent wine and uncomplicated company. She glares at the screen, the cruelty of Sebastian's dismissal ringing violently in her ears. 3 years of organizing her soul around a man who discards her like outdated office furniture. Operating on a wild surge of pure spite, her fingers fly across the glass. Tomorrow works at 8. Seth's reply is instantaneous, his text buzzing with an open excitement that feels foreign to Sebastian's suffocating shadow. The tragic truth is, sometimes we sprint toward by starlight simply to escape the dark room that has imprisoned us. Seth doesn't operate in the shadows, and he certainly doesn't play sick psychological mind games. What you see is precisely what you get with the enforcer, and perhaps his straightforward nature is exactly what her battered heart requires. She angrily shoves her belongings into her bag, desperate to escape the suffocating walls of this prison. Just as she prepares to flee, the heavy oak door slowly swings open once again. Sebastian fills the frame, stripped of his suit jacket. His white sleeves are carelessly rolled up, exposing the thick forearms that she has spent entirely too many midnight hours secretly admiring. Honestly, life is funny that way. We often plan our great escape just as the very thing holding us captive decides to show its most devastating hand. Before retreating into his fortress, Sebastian lingers in the doorway to drop a devastatingly calculated bomb. "Wear the blue dress," he murmurs into the silence. "The one from the charity gala last spring's. Stella S-Lungs simply stop working." This cold boss memorized the exact dress she wore 6 months ago in a packed ballroom where they barely spoke. She tries to challenge his bizarre obsession, but he deflects with a lie. "Seth likes blue," he mutters, shutting the heavy door with brutal finality. Left trembling in the empty room, the sheer irony of the moment threatens to break her. A man who obsessively guards his soul is styling her for another man. Yet we can all learn from this. The tiny details a person quietly memorizes will always expose what they truly value, no matter the walls they build to hide it. Hours later, locked in her apartment, the true psychological fallout begins to take root. Stella lies perfectly still in the heavy dark, the day's brutal events looping through her exhausted mind stream like a broken film reel. Her ceiling zoofs into a cinema screen, flashing every contradictory signal Sebastian has given her. In one breath, he coldly banishes her to another man's arms, and in the next he obsesses over a blow-breasted dress from a lifetime ago. This is not some simple romance. It is absolute psychological warfare, and she is bleeding out on the front lines. You and I have probably both learned the painful truth hidden in this sleepless night. The second you allow someone free space in your mind, they will ruthlessly steal your sleep, tearing your peace to absolute shreds until nothing is left. Let us look at this scene together. The camera focuses on the phone. Sebastian types with a frantic, desperate speed, his fingers slipping on the glass. He demands she take off the blue dress, acting like a cornered king trying to hold on to his crumbling territory. Stella just stares at his words. A quiet tremor shakes her hand as she replies, reminding this dangerous man that he forced her into this dinner with Seth. 5 heavy minutes drag through the silence before he gives up. She drops the phone onto the bed, her chest tight with confusion, and spends staring at the ceiling. It is a hard truth we all learn. The heaviest chains to break are the ones you secretly want someone else to lock around us. Outside, the grey dawn slowly creeps through the blinds, matching the storm in her mind. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that settles in your bones when you fight your own mind. 3 in the morning. Stella moves through her apartment like a ghost, his desperate messages replaying in her head. She leaves that beautiful blue dress hanging on the closet door, a quiet act of rebellion against his absolute need for control. She puts on a dark burgundy suit instead, wrapping herself in the armor of a cold professional. But as the elevator doors slide open at 7:30, the air in the lobby feels thick and hard to breathe. Marco, the heavyset security guard, gives her a long, knowing look. This is the simple reality of human strength. You can put the toughest armor and paint a braver for the world, but those that really look will always see the silent battles you are losing on the inside. Marco nods slowly, hiding whatever dark syndicate secret he knows behind a blank expression. Stella keeps her eyes down, letting the sharp-eyed click of her heels on the marble floor ground her. She opens her email, desperate for something normal. At 8:15 exactly, the heavy bronze elevator doors slide apart. Sebastian steps into the light. This is a man who usually wears his power like a tailored suit. Today he looks like a man drowning. Deep shadows bruise the skin under his eyes, his tie hanging loose over a wrinkled collar. The great kingpin is falling apart right in his own lobby, throwing her a rough, barely spoken greeting. It is a bitter lesson for everyone. The worst beatings we take in life come from our own hearts, and that invisible damage always shows up in your morning light. Let us pause and look closely at this shift in power. Instead of walking into his massive office, the boss stops completely at her desk. He mutters that the Moretti meeting is pushed to 10 o'clock at an underground club. He does not leave. He just stands there, pressing his heavy, violent hands flat against the polished wood of her desk. These are hands that tear down empires. Stella stares right at those scarred knuckles, drawing a line in the sand. She tells him quietly that if he wants to apologize for acting crazy last night, they need to step behind closed doors. It brings up a very real lesson about guarding our feelings. You can spend years building thick walls to protect your heart, but just one dare look from the exact right person will burn that fortress down to the ground. He accepts her challenge, guiding her into the massive, dimly lit office as the heavy oak door clicks shut. He turns his back to her, shoulders heavy, admitting his actions last night were wrong. But when he spins back around, the fierce heat in his eyes sucks all the air out of the room. He refuses to say sorry for how he actually feels. He moves toward her slowly, a dark predator backing his target into a corner, and his voice drops to a rough whisper. He tells her she looked absolutely beautiful in that blue dress, stripping away all his usual pride. It teaches us something wild about how people work. Complete honesty is the most dangerous weapon of all. When someone stops playing games and simply hands you their raw truth, it tears right through every defense mechanism you ever built. The feared crime lord leans close, whispering that she belongs by his side, not behind some desk. Stella pushes back hard, demanding to know why. If he feels so possessive, he is making her date another man. The muscle in his jaw jumps. He says Seth can give her a quiet, safe life, free from the blood and dirt of the syndicate. But Stella tilts her head, asking what happens if she actually wants his dangerous life. The air in the room practically catches fire. His eyes go pitch black with hunger, and he moves in, ready to pull her into his arms. Then her cell phone buzzes against the desk, breaking the silence into pieces. We all have to face this sad fact. The very moments that are supposed to change our lives forever are almost always ruined by the ordinary, random noise of the outside world. Of course, the bright screen shows a text from Seth confirming their dinners. As Sebastian stares at the glaring light, and you can almost hear the heavy steel doors of his mind slamming shut. That tiny flash of a broken man vanishes, quickly replaced by the cold eyes of a cartel boss. His whole body goes rigid and he orders her to text the man back so she does not keep him waiting. His voice sounds like cracking ice. Stella stumbles out into the bright hallway, her heart sinking into her stomach, completely crushed. It is a terrible mistake people make with love. We push the people we care about away, thinking we are keeping them safe from our own mess. But we fail to see that our cold rejection hurts them worse than any physical danger ever could. Down the hall, Mark watches her wipe a tear away, seeing everything.
Stick with me, cause we need a rival closely. It is only 10 in the morning, but the office feels as tight as a back alley card game.
The elevator opens, and Antonio Moretti steps out. He is a walking nightmare poured into an expensive Italian suit. He stops at Stella's desk, letting his flat, dead eyes crawl over her. He tells her she is gorgeous, adding that Sebastian is a very lucky man, but his voice has zero warmth. He sounds like a butcher looking at a fresh cut of meat. The hair on Stella's arm stands straight up. This gives us the oldest rule of survival. If a person simply walks into a room and your stomach ties itself into cold knots and you listen to that fear. A few minutes later, the low, ugly sound of men screaming at each other through Sebastian's heavy office door. The men are not screaming, but the low vibration of their anger hums right through the walls. Stella cannot make out the words, but you do not need to hear the sentences to recognize the sound of blood about to spill. Suddenly, the door flies open. Antonio walks out, pulling the heavy air of the room right along with him. He stops at her desk again, stretching a terrible, fake smile across his face, though his eyes stay completely dead. He leans down and whispers that she should be very careful about who she gives her heart to, because some men are monsters dressed as heroes. It is a dark truth about the world we live in. True danger almost never walks through the front door holding a gun. It usually comes in wearing a polite smile. Sebastian steps into the doorway right after, his voice cracking like a whip, ordering her inside. Walking back into that massive office feels like stepping in front of a firing squad. Sebastian is pacing back and forth by the tall windows, practically vibrating with violent energy. He barks at her, demanding to know what Antonio said. Swallowing a hard lump of fear, Stella repeats that cold warning about guarding her heart. Sebastian stops dead in his tracks. You can see the terror wash over his face, his jaw locking so tight his teeth might crack. Then he drops a bomb. Antonio already knew every detail about her quiet dinner date with Seth. The shock hits Stella right in the chest, stealing her breath as she realizes she is just a pawn on his twisted chessboard. It is a harsh lesson in protecting yourself. Never hand your loyalty over to a person who takes your deepest secrets and uses them to win their own dirty games. The icy shock melts away, leaving behind a blinding, white-hot anger. Stella throws away the polite assistant's routine, raising her voice to ask why her private life is suddenly currency for mobsters. For 3 years, she washed his dirty money, making his bloody look clean. Her prize is being dangled in front of a wolf like Antonio. She marches right up to him, her fists curled tight. She refuses to be a blind mouse in his maze anymore, demanding to know why a syndicate boss cares who she eats dinner with. It shows us a line we all have to draw eventually. When you find yourself bleeding out for someone who will not even give you the basic, honest truth, you have to pack up and walk out the door, facing her pure, burning rage. The stone-cold mask of the great Sebastian finally shatters into a million pieces. Listen closely, because this is where the entire world turns upside down. This is the moment the bloody truth falls onto the floor. Looking completely defeated, Sebastian admits that the whole criminal underworld already knows He is madly in love with her. His enemies have tracked the way his eyes never leave her when she walks into a room. His deep voice shakes us with a naked fear as he confesses she is his one fatal flaw. To kill the king, they just have to break the secretary. That quiet date with Seth was not an accident. It was a vicious trap by Antonio to see if Sebastian would flinch. It proves a very basic rule about human connection. Real love is supposed to be a warm house that keeps you safe from the storm. It should never pin a bright red target on your back for every hungry wolf in the forest to see. The camera pushes in on Stella. Cold lighting catches the frantic rise of her chest as she unravels, demanding the truth behind his cruel test. Sebastian's ironclad facade finally cracks, heavy shadows shifting across his face. It was not a test of her loyalty, but the desperate trial of his own control. Forcing her into that blue dress for another man broke him. He lets out a hollow, agonizing laugh, confessing that the mere image of another man touching her drove him to violent madness. The room feels impossibly small as he whispers his darkest reality. His very presence is a death sentence.
It plays out like an ancient tragedy. We learn that sometimes the purest form of devotion is having the strength to walk away entirely,
ensuring the one you love never burns in the flames of your ruined life. Notice how the camera frames them tightly here. We are witnessing a masterclass in suffocating intention. Sebastian relies on a desperate defense, his voice dropping an octave as he claims her as his own. He insists he cannot keep her alive if the city discovers she belongs to him. Stella refuses the role of the tragic maiden. She steps directly into his space, demanding her own agency. He argues her survival overrides her freedom. She counters beautifully, reminding him she has survived his dangerous shadows for 3 long years. We constantly try to manipulate the world for the people we cherish. Yet true devotion is never about forcing someone to hide safely under an umbrella. It is about having the raw courage to step out and stand right there, the freezing rain beside them. The ambient sound drops, amplifying the claustrophobia of the dim office. Stella anchors herself, an immovable force against his storm. She demands to know if he believed she stayed for a paycheck, or if she was blind to his lingering stares. Through the cinematic lens, the imposing boss fractures. Stripped of his armor, Sebastian looks devastatingly exhausted. He begs her to choose a safer life with Seth and bury their history. The silence that follows is agonizing. She flatly refuses his empty lies. Backed into a corner, he bleeds out a single, devastating word, everything. It forces us to confront a hard reality. The highest form of bravery is looking someone in the eye and admitting exactly what you hunger for, even when the thought of having it completely terrifies you. You and I are witnessing the collapse of a carefully constructed facade. The camera holds steady as Sebastian shatters, his repressed jealousy boiling over. He confesses a violent urge to ruin Seth, just to scream to the city that she is his alone. His knuckles grip the desk, stark white against dark wood, waging war against his possessive upbringing. Stella rejects the passive role he assigned her. She commands the kingpin to stop treating her life like a chess match. Just as her defiance lands, the office phone shrieks. It shatters the fragile intimacy, and she answers on pure reflex. It is a striking cinematic reminder. We exhaust ourselves hiding our ugliest shadows, forgetting that true loyalty means allowing others the agency to willingly walk through the fire beside us. The audio isolates a polished voice from the receiver, carrying a cold confidence that drains all warmth from the scene. The stranger speaks with sickening politeness. The second Stella demands a name, Sebastian's body language transforms. every muscle locks. His expression hardens into a mask of pure violence. The phantom caller wishes her a wonderful evening with our Seth, burying a death threat beneath a pleasant tone. Dead silence follows. Stella drops the phone, hands trembling in the harsh light. Beside her, Sebastian is unrecognizable, his jaw wound tight enough to snap. The vulnerable lover is entirely erased. It is a bitter pill we all swallow. Just as we carve out a second to process our deepest feelings, the chaotic world will inevitably kick the door down and demand its cruel due. The torn man we just saw is consumed by the ruthless syndicate boss, a shadow Stella has only witnessed in nightmares. The camera tracks his sudden movement. Sebastian's voice tears through the heavy doors, roaring for his top enforcer. Marco breaches the room in seconds, weapon drawn. Eyes dead and hollow. Sebastian barks orders to secure Stella in the bunker. He lays down an ironclad edict no one looks at her without his permission. When Stella attempts to challenge him, his freezing tone cuts her off. The king's territory is threatened, and he locks down the fortress. It illustrates a tragic human flaw. When pure panic takes the wheel,
our instinct is to build massive walls around the people we love, completely blind to the agonizing fact that those walls quickly become a suffocating prison.
The lighting grows starker as Sebastian lays out the chilling reality. The call proved his enemies are watching her. As Marco reaches for her arm, Stella anchors herself to the floor, refusing to be treated like cargo. She throws his toxic control back at him, demanding he stop playing God with her destiny. She will not hide while he fights alone. Beneath his panic, a flicker of profound respect crosses Sebastian's dark eyes. He warns her of the horrific violence ahead, but she demands the gruesome reality over his sanitized illusion of safety. It is a vital turning point in their tragedy. Genuine security is never found by keeping someone in the dark. True trust is handing them the ugliest truth you possess, and deciding to carry the crushing weight of it together. Look at this framing. Consider what it takes to terrify a man who orchestrates violence for a living. Stella demands the names of their hunters. With a silent glare, Sebastian dismisses his enforcer from the dim room. He moves methodically to the decanter, pouring a brutal measure of scotch. The sound design highlights the heavy clink of glass. Stella knows the rule. He never drinks before dusk unless someone is marked for death. He drops the Annaville whist. It is the Capezzi family. Holding her terrified gaze, he admits the agonizing truth. She is the singular weakness that they plan to exploit, or he swallows the drink like poison. It is a profound realization. Our most fatal vulnerabilities are rarely the physical defenses we lack, but rather the very people we deeply allow ourselves to love. A melancholic score swells as Stella whispers that the syndicate targets her because he cares. Sebastian shatters that understatement. His voice is heavy with defeat. They want her because he is desperately in love with her. He confesses it like a terminal diagnosis. 2 years of silent obsession. It started during a midnight audit. Grounded by his cologne while he watched the city lights like a solitary ghost. It illustrates how real affection develops. True romance does not arrive with loud fireworks. It quietly takes root in the mundane, exhausted hours of our lives, changing us when we are not looking. Sorrowful shadows stretch across the room as the truth hits Stella. His emotional starvation was a tragic performance to protect her. Sebastian sets his glass down with deliberate quietness. He confesses the agony of building a fortress of cruelty to push her away. The deception was flawless until Seth asked for her time and Sebastian's mask fractured in front of monsters. A muscle ticks in his jaw. His self-loathing is palpable. He insists he tried to let her find a normal life. But Antonio caught the scent of his buried jealousy. Leaving her exposed without his army was signing her execution order. It exposes a harsh reality. You can spend years lying to your own reflection, but the wolves watching from the tree-laned triangles will always see it right through your disguise. The Don lays out the brutal mathematics of his underworld. If his men saw him breaking, the network knew his secret. He was trapped in a tragic binary: crown her as his queen or violently exile her. He stares into the toxic glow of the skyline. Pushing her towards Seth was his agonizing final act, a trick to prove she meant nothing. But that phone call burned his theater to the ground. His saw past the smoke to watch the king bleed out. Hearing the defeat in his voice, Stella does the unthinkable and steps closer to the monster. Let us take away a haunting lesson here. Treating your heart like a chessboard is foolish. When we perform indifference, we merely leave our loved ones standing unprotected in the direct line of fire. Let you and I step into the heavy shadows of the room, watching the power dynamic violently fracture. Stella demands to know the cartel's true craving. For one fleeting second, Sebastian's iron armor dissolves. He confesses his enemies want his throne, using her as the bloody bait to shatter his focus. Instantly, the dictator returns, barking cold orders for her to vanish into a safe house. But Stella refuses the tragic role of the pawn. She invades his space, dismantling his toxic hypocrisy. The camera pushes in as she exposes his protection as a suffocating, gilded birdcage. It leaves us with a heavy, enduring realization. Wrapping a steel chain in soft velvet does not make it an embrace. Real love demands the raw courage to let your partner stand and fight the creeping dark right beside you. The camera lingers on Sebastian's rigid jaw as he cracks. His voice drops to her harsh gravel, declaring her desires mean nothing when her survival is on the line. The cruel words hang between them like suffocating smoke. Disgusted by his own viciousness, he squeezes his eyes shut, but Stella remains immovable. She strips away his twisted reality, where caging her is acceptable just to keep her breathing. Suddenly, the ruthless king shatters. His voice fractures into a desperate whisper. He confesses that if she caught a bullet for his violent sins, the guilt would bury him alive. He orders brutal violence without a thought, yet the image of her bleeding brings him to his knees. This unveils a tragic, unavoidable truth. The exact thing that gives us our ultimate strength will always become our deep, fatal vulnerability. The lighting shifts across Stella's face as her voice drops to a steady whisper. She demands a genuine choice, not a dictator's cold ultimatum. Sebastian stares back, raw desperation bleeding through his mask. He offers two tragic paths. Lock her away under heavy guard, or she leaves forever so he can convince his enemies she means nothing. Stella sees through the mobster facade to a man suffocating from panic. He is not a villain. He is paralyzed by the terror of loss. Refusing this toxic logic, she demands a third option. She rejects the safe house, refuses to flee, and chooses to stand directly in the bloody crossfire by his side. This brings a profoundly resonant truth to light. We constantly try to organize our lives into perfectly safe boxes, but the most authentic paths require us to abandon our comfort and step straight into the raging fire together. Let us pause the frame and look at this together. Is Stella losing her mind or crafting a masterstroke? She pushes the Mafia Don to claim her openly before the underworld. Rather than shrinking into a victim, This becomes a fierce battle through cry. If enemies are painting a target on her back, she chooses the blinding spotlight, wielding the terrifying weight of his reputation as her shield. Sebastian's dark eyes ignite with a dangerous hunger. He steps close, his shadow enveloping her, warning that going public is a permanent brand. She will be chained to his nightmare, inheriting every rival and stray bullet. The underlying truth here is heavy and undeniable. Loving someone completely means embracing their entire existence. You cannot simply bathe in the comfortable, warm light. You must have the raw courage to swallow their terrifying darkness too. The camera pushes in as Sebastian delivers a freezing reality check. He declares her ordinary life is permanently finished, replaced by suffocating security and the death of freedom. Yet, Stella utterly rejects the role of a tragic victim. Interrupting his warnings, she reclaims her agency, refusing to be locked away like a fragile possession. If she enters this underworld chaos, she demands to step onto the stage as an equal. In a heartbeat, Sebastian closes the distance. His hands frame her face with an aching gentleness, searching her eyes for any flicker of hesitation. He makes a dark, unbreakable vow. Once he claims her, he will never let go, regardless of the violent storms ahead. This scene highlights a profound truth.
Genuine devotion is never about surrendering your person top house to Zaz. It is about actively combining your strength to stand against the cold dark together.
The air in the room becomes completely suffocating. Sebastian stares her down, his voice dropping to ice as he commands her to cancel her safe dinner date. He insists the city must know she belongs to him. The camera holds Osla. She refuses to blink. With her pulse hammering at her throat, she challenges him to prove it. Stop hiding behind dangerous words, she demands, and show the syndicate. This defiance sparks a terrifying possessive shadow across his face. He summons his top enforcer, issuing an ironclad directive. They are booking the most visible room at Il Giardino tonight. Marco must broadcast this to every crime family, ensuring their deadliest rivals hear it first. This dramatic shift reflects a grounded truth about ambition. When you finally step up and claim your space in this world, you can never afford to whisper. You must make your actions so undeniable that everyone is forced to pay attention. Marco maintains cold professionalism, though the shock in his posture is palpable. He asks for the next directive. Sebastian does not pause. He orders his enforcer to contact their jeweler, demanding a diamond ring by 7 tonight. Stella physically recoils, arguing this an escalation is moving entirely too fast. But Sebastian stands before her like a wall of solid iron. In his brutal world, there are no half measures. She will wear his ring for the underworld to witness. The lighting dims as he confesses. He has waited 2 agonizing years for this exact moment. Hours ago, she lived an ordinary life. Now, she is the profound obsession of a crime lord. This sharp Semitic pivot reminds us of a humbling reality. The trajectory of our existence can flip upside down in a single. We must cultivate the mental resilience to adapt when sudden absolute chaos arrives at our door. The camera captures Stella holding her ground, proving she meant every word, and gaze sharpens into something dangerously focused. He commands her to pack her apartment, assuring her Marco will shadow her every step. She must return by 7 to display their unified front. This intense possessiveness should terrify her, yet it inexplicably ignites a wildfire inside her. Still, guilt flashes across her face. She mentions Seth, the innocent man caught in their crossfire. Sebastian's jaw tightens with dark jealousy. He will handle Seth personally, cementing his absolute rule. Walking out, Stella moves in a cinematic daze. The staff tracks her, sensing the tectonic shift in her status. This highlights a vital realization about change. When destiny finally seizes the steering wheel of your life, fighting the sharp turn is pointless. You simply have to brace yourself and lean into the inevitable ride. In the shadows, rumors spread with violent speed. As Marco holds the elevator, Stella's phone vibrates. The screen illuminates with a text from Seth, confirming their date. Guilt washes over her features. Seth represents pure safety, a decent man offering a stable future. Yet she is abandoning him because of a ruthless mafia. Don just confessed a consuming obsession. The cinematic contrast is jarring. Before she can type an apology, a second message appears. It is Sebastian's Bastion. The stark text orders her not to reply, promising he will handle it, demanding her absolute trust. You and I must recognize something crucial about human desire right here. True, transformative passion rarely chooses the perfectly paved road. Stella simply drops her phone into her bag and steps into the elevator, leaving her quiet past behind forever. She's plunging headfirst into a dangerous and intoxicating unknown, completely ready for the fall. The camera tracks the black sedan as it blows past the turn to Stella's apartment. Marco navigates toward a towering skyscraper, an elite fortress guarded by white-gloved doormen. Panic flashes in Stella's eyes. This is not her home. Marco's face remains a complete brick wall. He coldly explains she's relocated to Sebastian's property until the cartel heat fades. Then there's a psychological blow. Marco casually mentions her belongings have already been transferred. No warning, no discussion, zero permission. The terrifying reality of Sebastian's absolute control hits her chest like a truck. It is deeply, beautifully suffocating. Marco meets her panicked gaze with a cold truth, stating the boss is simply keeping her alive. This forces us to confront a tragic reality about power and protection. Sometimes the heavy promise of ultimate safety looks exactly like a locked, gilded cage. Marco's reality check hits hard. Her old apartment offered zero security. A rival hitman could easily kick the door in. Despite his suffocating methods, she accepts this move to survive. The doors open into a massive penthouse, blasting Stella with an imposing cinematic display of wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcase the glittering skyline. The furniture belongs in a museum, and a priceless painting hangs above the fireplace. It is a mesmerizing space. Yet, as the camera tracks her wandering through this flawless, empty mansion, a chilling realization settles into her bones. This brings us to a vital truth. You must always inspect the hidden locks on your major life upgrades. Because right now, despite the breathtaking luxury, Stella is simply a beautiful, tragic bird trapped inside a solid gold cage. Marco gestures toward the master suite, knowing her wardrobe arrives within the hour. Stella floats through the cavernous penthouse, moving like a pale ghost haunting a forgotten palace. The marble is breathtaking, yet devoid of human warmth. Her trembling voice then fractures the illusion. How long has Sebastian owned this estate? Marco does not blink. 3 months. The words strike her chest like a physical blow. 3 months ago was the exact day Seth first asked her out. The Don was never reacting to a crisis. He was patiently forging a gilded cage, waiting to snap the lock. You and I must recognize this chilling truth together. We frequently mistake sudden actions for pure impulse, missing the silent architects meticulously building our fate in the shadows. Stella freezes in that agonized space between righteous fury and awe. The door clicks shut as Marco leaves her to unearth the true depths of her captivity. Pulling open the pantry, her breath hitches There sits her obscure brand of coffee beside the exact dark chocolate she hoards in her desk. The vanity mirrors this terrifying devotion,
displaying her favorite lotions in pristine alignment. He has not merely watched her, has dissected her existence with dark obsession. Standing in that room, her pulse pounding,
she realizes she has never felt so profoundly understood. It teaches a complicated lesson. Sometimes, the most terrifying elements in our lives mirror the exact attention we have spent our entire existence secretly begging to receive. Her hand lifts the receiver, breath catching as she speaks his name. Sebastian asks with quiet authority if she is settling in. Stella pushes back, accusing him of buying a penthouse to lock her away. He corrects her instantly. It is a safe house. To a man steeped in violence, semantics are absolute law. When she challenges his obsessive cataloging of her life, the line falls silent. Then, his iron exterior fractures into raw devotion. Knowing her every need, he murmurs, is how he keeps her breathing. For years, he has memorized every habit that brings her joy. Listen closely, because real care rarely announces itself with grand gestures. It is found in the unflinching gaze of someone who refuses to look away. Stella stands there, unable to utter a single word. She whispers into the receiver that this reality feels equal parts terrifying and romantic. Sebastian releases a jagged sigh, acknowledging those words define his existence. Through the speaker, brutal shouts of his syndicate bleed in. Judy drags him back to the shadows. He tells her to expect a jeweler at 6 to choose a ring. His tone drops into a dark, possessive rumble. He orders her to wear something powerful. Not the blue dress, because that vulnerability is reserved for him. Tonight, she must drape herself in armor. At exactly 6 o'clock, the door chimes. Vincent waits, flanked by towering guards and a metal briefcase. Let this be a simple reminder for us all. When the world forces you onto a brutal battlefield, you must dress like you are entirely prepared to win the war. Vincent bows, placing the steel briefcase onto the sprawling mahogany table. The latch clicks, and as the lid rises, the air leaves Stella S. lungs. Nestled on black velvet are diamonds so heavy they swallow the room's light. A single stone could eclipse her lifetime of earnings. Vincent details the parameters set by the Don. The piece must command dominance without slipping into vulgarity. It must broadcast an unbreakable commitment. Staring into the blinding fire of the gems, Stella feels the final fragments of her old life turn to dust. Hours ago, she was answering mundane emails. Tonight, she is being crowned in the shadows. It is a stark reminder of our fragile existence. One profound, unexpected choice possesses the absolute power to rewrite your entire destiny forever. Amidst that blinding sea of gems, a single piece anchors Stella's gaze. It is a square-cut diamond flanked by 2 deep emeralds. She whispers her choice, cementing the decision before panic paralyzes her throat. Vincent offers a knowing smile, sliding the heavy band onto her shaking finger. The 5th is flawless. Naturally, the Don possessed her exact measurements. The revelation hits when Vincent murmurs that Sebastian chose this exact ring yesterday. Before she can process it, the jeweler delivers the final strike. The piece was commissioned the boss merely called yesterday to declare his wait over. You and I recognize the terrifying beauty in such strategic patience. The most massive foundations in our lives are poured quietly in the dark, long before the walls rise. Vincent notes the Don has been called many terrible names, but impulsive is never one of them. This web was spun ages ago. Later, Stella stands by the glass, the diamond dragging her hand down like an emotional anchor. The silence shatters with a text from Seth. He admits Sebastian made contact, and the violent puzzle pieces have finally locked together. Seth delivers a haunting observation, writing that they look at each other as if the rest of humanity has ceased to exist. He warns that a man like Sebastian will gladly burn the world to ash just to keep her warm, but playing with an inferno guarantees severe burns. It forces a difficult reality upon us. The most breathtaking things we encounter are often the most lethal, and we alone must measure the price we are willing to pay. Stella remains anchored to the glass, consumed by the echo of Seth's warnings. She weighs the catastrophic cost of Sebastian's dark, all-consuming obsession. A devotion this heavy always extracts a brutal toll. Suddenly, 3 sharp knocks fracture the silence. The door swings open to reveal an imposing woman with eyes like chipped ice. It is Claudia Ricci, the formidable aunt of the boss. For 3 ignorant years, Stella was shielded from the ruthless mafia reality of his bloodline. Claudia glides inside, her calculating gaze dissecting Stella with the exact predatory focus that defines her nephew. It proves a hauntingly universal point about the structures we build. You can spend a lifetime stacking thick bricks to hide your vulnerable truths, but it will eventually bring those ringy walls crashing to the ground. Claudia claims the velvet sofa with authority, moving with the lethal elegance of a woman who has survived decades of bloodshed. She refuses to mince words, declaring she waited for her nephew to drop his corporate disguise and claim his prize. To Claudia, this violent collision of their worlds was inked in the stars long ago, but she did not come to offer warm blessings. Leaning in close, she delivers a chilling reality check. Rival factions will view Stella as a fragile outsider. They will hunt her every vulnerability to shatter Sebastian's empire from the inside. It is a heavy burden, yet you and I will inevitably walk into rooms designed to make us feel weak and out of place. When that happens, it is only our unyielding courage that ultimately forces the world to bow. Stella stands frozen under the crushing weight of this hidden underworld. The lavish penthouse now feels like the gilded cage she always feared. Invisible bars tightening against her chest. Stripped of her corporate armor, she whispers that she has no idea if she can survive this, yet she is willing to try. Claudia offers a slow, knowing smile in the dim light. In a syndicate drowning in blood, raw honesty remains the highest currency. The older woman reveals a delicate gold chain with a solitary star. As she fastens the cold metal around Stella's neck, Claudia speaks of her own mother, who walked into the Mafia inferno and forced the old guard to bow. It leaves us with a harsh but necessary life lesson. True belonging is never a soft gift handed to you, but rather a brutal territory you must fiercely fight to earn. The camera catches the gold chain on her collarbone. It is not a brand marking her as property, but physical proof of her own choice. She's actively stepping into the flames. Tears blur Stella's vision as she whispers her gratitude, though Claudia dismisses it with a sharp wave. The matriarch warns this brutal life will inevitably draw blood, yet swears to guide her through the dark. Claudia then reveals the immediate threat. The rival Calabrese faction is circling, and Sebastian is playing a glit game, a reckless James Stewart. Stella survives the night. When violence erupts, absolute trust must be her shield. It reflects a terrifying reality we all eventually face. Sometimes, when your world lives into the greatest life in his split lesson is simply learning to close your eyes and trust the person steering the wheel. Stella Bruza crosses the invisible boundary into the underworld. Surrendering to the man, her mind begs her to flee. She wears a sharp, pitch-black dress, an armor that transforms her quiet terror into cold authority. The headquarters sits in heavy silence, broken only by the harsh light bleeding from beneath the heavy oak door. Marco knocks once. As Stella crosses the threshold, Sebastian slowly raises his head from his desk. The raw, violent starvation in his dark gaze strikes her with physical force, a silent confession echoing in the massive room. You and I can learn a profound truth about human nature right here. You can build the highest and thickest walls around your heart. But when you deeply desire someone, your eyes will always confess your forbidden secrets to the whole world. We have all seen that wild, unhinged look before, that dangerous collision of dark possession and absolute worship. Sebastian speaks in a ragged whisper, calling her beautiful as his intense gaze drops to the emeralds against her skin. She unknowingly chose the exact gems that seal her tragic fate. The boss steps from behind his desk in a flawless black tuxedo, moving like a predator. He admits the stones match a necklace belonging to his late mother. He orchestrated this test, ensuring Stella understood the deadly gravity of joining his syndicate. When she asks what she is actually walking into, a slow, dark smile spreads across his face. Everything, he replies. It brings up us a simple life lesson. Deep down, we all secretly crave someone brave enough to hand over their completely broken world just to keep us safely near. He means that terrifying word in its absolute entirety. Moving with deliberate precision, Sebastian produces a weathered velvet box from the shadows. Inside lies a heavy emerald necklace, carrying the dark ghosts of his violent past. It was a wedding gift to his mother from a father who lived and died by the gun. His voice drops to a fractured register, exposing a raw vulnerability the ruthless boss hides from the world. He declares the heirloom belongs to her now. When Stella tries to refuse, he steps close behind her, his looming presence ending the argument. He fastens the cold metal around her neck, ensuring the underground will see his legacy on her skin. This teaches us a profound life lesson. It is a terrifying yet beautiful thing to be loved loudly by a man who usually operates in total, deadly silence. Sebastian brings his large hands up to frame her face, anchoring her in the eye of this mafia storm. He softly reveals that the real war is just beginning. Stella must learn to stand by his side while losing her soul, while this ruthless leader must learn to stop gripping the world by its throat. His thumb gently brushes her trembling lip as he warns her about the Galibresi family. They will not back down simply because he claimed her. In fact, she has just become their ultimate target. His jaw locks with cold resolve, vowing that anyone coming for her will have to put him in the ground first. He pulls her into a kiss built on years of starved desperation. It proves a difficult life lesson. You can never fully merge your life with another person without fundamentally changing who you are in the process. Stella melts into his embrace, and we can almost hear his iron walls fracturing. Beneath his freezing exterior lies the frantic desperation of a starving man who has finally secured the one thing he truly needs. When they pull apart, struggling for air, he rests his forehead against hers, asking if she is ready to show the city exactly who holds her heart. They arrive at an exclusive restaurant, its heavy exposed brick looking like a shadowy cinematic set. As they step through the doors, the host bows deeply, his pale face showing a wild mixture of pure terror and deep respect. Every single patron stops eating, turning to stare at the dangerous couple. It leaves us with an undeniable life lesson. Life is about power. No matter how tough you act, true love will always strip you down to your bare, vulnerable foundation. Sebastian rests his hand on the ball of Stella's back, a silent but absolute claim as they move through an ocean of watchful eyes. He walks with the heavy authority of a man who owns the city, mainly because he does. Anxious whispers ripple across the dim dining room. The criminal elite are losing their minds seeing a mere assistant wearing the legendary Ritchie family necklace. Rumors always spread like wildfire in a room full of poisonous vipers. They leave the stairs behind, stepping into a private dining space draped in thick velvet that swallows the noise. Crystal glasses and tall windows looking out over a dark garden create a quiet paradise. It brings us to a simple life lesson. You can build the thickest fortress walls, but the most valuable treasure is always the person sitting right across the table. He murmurs that she looks beautiful, letting his hands linger heavily on her shoulders. Beneath the flickering candlelight, Sebastian makes a quiet confession that shatters her remaining defenses. He booked this exact room 12 times over the last 2 years, only to cancel every reservation. He simply could not stomach bringing another woman to a place his soul reserved for Stella. It was 2 agonizing years of watching from the cold shadows, lying to himself that he kept his distance to protect her. Now, his dark eyes carry the heavy weight of regret as he admits the brutal truth. He was never protecting her at all. He was just terrified of having his own heart broken. The life lesson here is deeply human. We often disguise our cowardice as noble sacrifice, but running from love hurts far more than being brave enough to risk it. Let us look at this quiet moment together. Sebastian slides his hand across the linen tablecloth, the vulnerable gesture looking exactly like ultimate surrender. The Calabrese family forced his hand, proving they knew Stella was his greatest weakness. By pretending she meant nothing, he left her wandering a battlefield without armor. Stella is visibly trembling, yet she places her hand firmly inside his anyway. A waiter silently pours champagne before vanishing. Sebastian raises his glass to the truth, claiming the woman he loves and honoring her fierce bravery. Choosing a dangerous path when you know the cost takes real strength. It teaches us a vital life lesson. True courage means stepping into the fire with your eyes wide open. She takes a slow sip, looks at this ruthless boss, and gently asks about his past. Stella pushes him about his mother, challenging his guarded silence. We can clearly see the fracture spreading through his iron armor. He shares the heavy history, explaining how his father's heart gave out when Sebastian was 16, crushed by the pressure of running a crime syndicate. His mother faded away just 3 years later. Tracing slow, protective circles on Stella's hand, he whispers his mother would have respected her stubborn spine. When she asks if he is merely chasing a ghost, he immediately shuts it down. He is devoted to Stella because she looked at a criminal and sees a man, not a monster. It reminds us of a beautiful life lesson. The strongest human bonds often grow in the craters left by our deepest grief. He loves her because she falls asleep with ink on her face and still looks perfect to him. The waiters bring out plates of handcrafted pasta in absolute silence. As they eat, the rigid walls they built between them finally shatter. Stripped of his cold boss persona, Sebastian transforms. He is still a powerful man vibrating with dangerous energy, but there is a beating heart visible beneath his custom suit now. The life lesson here is crystal clear. Taking off your protective mask is the most dangerous thing you can ever do. But you must risk exposure if you want true connection. Halfway through the meal, Stella asks a heavy question. What does her life look like tomorrow? He puts his silver fork down and locks his dark eyes with hers. From now on, his youth will track her every move. It is not about turning her into a prisoner, but it is the brutal, unavoidable price of keeping her breathing in his chaotic, violent world. The low rumble of Sebastian's voice vibrate through the dim room, wrapping around Stella like a heavy silk shroud. He insists her apartment remains hers, yet the rigid set of his jaw betrays his true desire. He needs her locked in his penthouse. For a fleeting second, his armor fractures, and confessing a desperate need to wake up beside her. Stella's chest tightens with a complicated warmth. He vows to take this storm of changes slowly, but the shadowed lighting in his eyes scripts a different scene. He intends to drown her in his dark underworld.
You and I both understand the terrifying irony here.
We often think we are building a safe sanctuary for the ones we love, only to realize we have merely forged a much more beautiful cage. He leans back, offering her a velvet throne. He praises her intellect, framing her as the brilliant architect his shadowy operations need. Sebastian does not blink when she hesitates. The camera lingers on his gaze as he promises to strip away the disguise of his violent nature, insisting his partner deserves the bloody reality. Before Stella can absorb the weight of that warning, a jarring ringtone shatters the intimacy. From text from Marco flashes in the dim light. In a single frame, Sebastian shifts from a vulnerable man to a terrifying mob boss. He mutters about a breach, his voice dropping to a glacial command for her to stay put. Life has a cruel habit of interrupting the exact we finally drop our heavy walls. Tonight, leaving a suffocating dread hovering over the empty table. The heavy velvet curtain snaps shut, sealing Stella inside the suffocating opulence of the room. The silence presses down on her, broken only by muffled shouts in the hall. The camera set focuses on her trembling hands twisting a linen napkin. The massive diamond on her finger catches the low light, flashing like a warning of the violent tragedy she has entered. When the thick fabric finally parts, her relief sheeters into pure dread. It is not Sebastian filling the doorway. A younger man steps into the frame, flashing a calculated smile that fails to reach his dead eyes. He smoothly introduces himself as Dante Calabra. We constantly ignore the blaring alarms in our intuition, blindly hoping for the best, until the predator is already standing right in front of us. The Calibra family. This is the exact nightmare Sebastian bled to shield her from. Stick with me, because this scene reveals a brilliant psychological break. Raw panic floods her veins, driving her backward until her spine hits the freezing glass. She demands he leave, but Dante merely laughs. He brags about orchestrating a phantom shootout to steal this moment. Pacing like a starving serpent, he mocks a ruthless kingpin for risking an empire over a romance. For a moment, Stella screams at him, but her defiance only feeds his dark amusement. The quiet takeaway here is that true courage is never about the absence of fear. Courage is holding your ground when your entire reality is collapsing. Leaning close enough to share his breath, he drops the fatal truth. She is leaving with him tonight. Dante sneers from the shadows, promising a painful discussion about Sebastian and his brutal expansion. Stella plants her feet, refusing to yield. The cinematic tension spikes when Dante slides a hand inside his tailored jacket, drawing out the freezing-in steel of a handgun. The romantic dinner illusion is violently assassinated. He offers her the classic tragedy of a forced choice. Terror paralyzes her muscles, yet she warns him that firing a weapon in this fortress is a suicide mission. Completely unbothered, Dante slips the gun away. Instead, he produces a medical syringe, the sharp needle gleaming maliciously in the candlelight. A mild sedative, he whispers. This is a brutal lesson that sometimes the quietest, most subtle attacks are the ones that destroy our lives. She spits a promise that Sebastian will literally tear him apart. Dante returns an arrogant smirk, noting they must find him first. The camera jolts as he lunges through the shadows. Stella drops into pure survival mode, grabbing a heavy champagne bottle and swinging it wildly. Dante dodges Douglas, his sick laughter filling the room. He is totally intoxicated by the hunt. She lets out a ragged drink scream, scrambling backward. Suddenly, the heavy velvet curtain is violently ripped from its rings. Sebastian fills the doorway, his face a mask of absolute nightmare fuel. He radiates the frozen energy of a natural killer. It proves you never fully grasp the dangerous monster hiding inside someone you love until a rival tries to steal them away. Unfazed, Dante dares him to start a war. Dante freezes as he processes the terrifying stillness rolling off Sebastian. The boss drops a whisper that sounds like an open grave, swearing he will wipe Dante and his family tree from the earth before sunrise. You and I need to carefully unpack this, because that was not a warning. It was an unbreakable blood oath. Marco slides out of the shadows, weapon raised, flanked by an army sealing the exits. Dante throws his hands up with a monk grin, claiming the game is far from over. Sebastian steps into the light, vibrating with lethal rage. He states the game ended the exact second Dante dared to look at his woman. The hardest lesson here is that crossing the wrong boundary does not just create drama, it seals your absolute doom. He quietly orders Marco to drag the trash outside. Marco grabs Dante, dragging him into the hallway before the heavy doors slam shut. Sebastian crosses the room in 2 strides. The contrast is stunning. The very same hands that destroy rival empires are shockingly gentle. He frames her pale face, his dark eyes frantic, demanding to know if Dante touched her. Stella shakes her head, but the adrenaline crashes, leaving her violently trembling. He pulls her tight against his chest, wrapping around her like a bulletproof vest. He whispers she is safe, but his tone shifts to absolute ice when she asks how the enemy slipped inside. A paid insider. Life teaches us this agonizing truth again and again. The worst betrayal always comes from your inner circle. We build massive iron walls to lock enemies out, only to invite the real snakes to dinner. Sebastian assures her the traitors are being handled, his voice carrying a dead calm. When Stella asks what happens to Dante, he brushes a quiche from her, promising nothing goes down tonight. Tonight is just strictly about keeping her breathing. But tomorrow, the rival family will learn what happens when you threaten his world, and Stella begs him not to trigger a mafia war over her. He stares into her eyes, revealing the war has already begun. She is his absolute limit, and anyone who crosses it pays the blood tax. She is terrified by the suffocating weight of his devotion. It is true what they say. Love is a beautiful thing, but an obsessed love is a raging wildfire that will gladly burn a city down. It shows how dangerous a man becomes when he finds what he cannot lose. Stick with me here, because this beat permanently shifts their dynamic. Stella whispers she wants to go home, longing for the boring safety of her apartment. Sebastian shuts that delusion down instantly. His jaw tightens as he declares she is going straight to his penthouse, the one fortress he controls. Pressing his forehead gently against hers, he asks her to let him protect her. She's too exhausted to fight, thus giving a silent nod. The fantasy of a normal date night is dead, replaced by the suffocating reality of loving a crime boss. As guards march them through the alleys, the true gravity hits her. We jump blindly down a beautiful path, praying the thorns will not cut us. But every choice comes with a brutal receipt, and reality will always collect its dangerous debt. Let us be perfectly honest. Loving an underworld boss is like holding a loaded weapon right against your own neck. By standing beside him, Stella walked straight into the crosshairs of his ruthless rivals, making herself the ultimate weakness to break his empire. But here is the tragic part. She chose him anyway. She stared at the warning signs, the violence, and the terror, and decided she was all in. It teaches you a harsh but beautiful lesson about the complicated human heart. We will willingly walk into a dark hurricane if it means standing next to the person we truly care about. Soon they arrive at his penthouse, consuming the entire top floor. She had only ever pictured his lonely late nights in that private elevator, but stepping inside, the reality was different. The penthouse was massive. The camera pans across rich dark wood, vintage leather, and towering glass looking over the glittering skyline. The compelling twist? It felt like a real home, not a cold supervillain lair. There were stacks of worn books, a random coffee mug by the sink, and a soft blanket on the couch. Sebastian catches her looking, his shoulders dropping as he declares this is where he wants her to live from now on. Meanwhile, Marco and the security squad ruthlessly sweep every shadow. On the ride over, Sebastian had been barking rapid-fire Italian into his phone, sounding like a warlord commanding a siege. You and I have probably both noticed this painful truth. The civilized masks we wear vanish the second our loved ones are caught in the line of fire. The heavy steel doors bolt shut with a final thud, sealing them in silence. This supposedly untouchable king of the underworld is unraveling, pacing the glass windows like a cornered beast. The sheer gravity of his brutal empire is dragging him under. He mutters bitter curses, disgusted by his own fatal miscalculation. He genuinely believed claiming Della openly would forge an iron shield around her, but it merely painted a massive target on her back. Stella steps into his shadow, her heart fracturing at the weight of his guilt. We try to control every moving piece of our existence, yet love steps in and violently strips away our armor. It forces even the hardest souls to learn that shielding jostling someone else is vastly more difficult than saving yourself. Pins on his heel, and the absolute agony burning in his dark eyes steals the breath from her lungs. He whispers that loving her might be a fatal weakness he simply cannot afford. Those words land like a heavy blow. She softly asks if he truly believes that. Sebastian drags a tired hand through his hair, pouring a glass of neat scotch. He confesses that seeing his rival near her made him want to violently burn a whole bloodline to ash. Downing the drink, his voice shakes with raw vulnerability as he admits such blinding rage is a massive liability. Stella steps close, gently pulling the glass from his grip. This is the wild tragedy of romance. The profound devotion that ultimately saves a person's soul is very often the exact thing that shatters their peace of mind. Let us pause and examine this standoff together, right where devotion violently collides with panic. The penthouse is cast in shadow as Stella demands Sebastian look her in the eye. When he yields, his gaze is a chaotic storm of terror and fierce loyalty. She makes her stance clear. She chose him knowing the risks, and he cannot lock her in a gilded cage now. Pressing a hand to his chest, she feels the frantic rhythm of his heart beneath the tailored suit. She refuses to be a fragile companion, demanding her place as his equal. He argues she cannot comprehend the darkness she invites, but she remains immovable. True partnership demands stepping into the shadows side by side. Life asks us to face its cold realities united, rather than hiding from the bitter storm all alone. Stella anchors herself, her voice forged in heavy iron. She explains that no one can stand beside him in the sunlight, only you to be banished when darkness falls. Sebastian studies her, caught in a silent war. Finally, his fortress crumbles. He asks if she is ready for the truth. For 6 months, a rival syndicate has bled his territory dry, turning his men and severing supply lines. His tone drops into a terrifying calm. The attempt to capture her was the ultimate declaration of war, a gamble that he would surrender his empire to keep her breathing. When she asks if he will yield, a chilling smile crosses his face. He refuses completely. Sometimes the only way to truly protect the people you love is to brace yourself for absolute ruin and let the ashes fall where they may. He murmurs a vow that anyone daring to look at her with ill intent, face wrath making war feel like fear. The contrast is purely cinematic. He gently, reverently cups her face while describing the annihilation of an entire bloodline. Normally, hearing a man plot to erase a family would be a reason to run. Yet, their dynamic has shifted. Rather than recoiling, Stella finds a dark satisfaction knowing he would burn the cities to ash for her safety. Holding his gaze, she simply asks how she can help. Sebastian is visibly taken aback, insisting this violence it's not her burden, but she has already claimed its heavy weight. When you deeply care for someone, you quickly learn that their heaviest burdens and dangerous automatically become your own to fight. Stick with me, because this is where the power dynamic truly evolves. She demands to know her role in the coming storm. In the heavy silence that follows, something fundamental shifts behind Sebastian's eyes. It is absolute respect. He declares she will walk into the syndicate meeting squarely at his side. Wearing his ring and his mother's heirloom necklace, she will prove she is no fragile pawn. Stella accepts this dangerous crown without hesitation. Pulling her firmly against his chest, he wonders aloud how a man like him found her. With a knowing smile, she reminds him that found him first, tracing it back to a simple evening of offering his jacket against the cold. It reminds us that the smallest act of genuine kindness can completely rewrite the trajectory of a life. Stella challenges him to prove his devotion. She desires neither his wealth nor his bloody schemes of retribution. She simply wants the man himself, anchored in the present moment. Stripping away defensive armor to display vulnerability is a profound show of strength. Sebastian's gaze darkens as decades of fortified emotional walls collapse to dust. Stella murmurs that her patience is gone, demanding the entirety of his soul. The kiss that crashes between them is a cinematic release of tension. It is far from polite. It is the collision of 2 years of emotional arbitrage meeting a sudden feast. He pauses a breath, re-seeking her final consent. Hearing it, he lifts her into his arms. Taking a blind leap of faith for someone you deeply care about remains the bravest move any person can ever make. The bedroom is our shadow sanctuary, draped in dark fabrics and the quiet weight of wealth. Sebastian lowers her to the mattress with profound reverence, though his gaze burns with untamed hunger. His voice is thick as he confesses to visualizing this moment, countless nights haunted by the image of her here. Stella urges him to abandon lonely dreams and anchor himself in reality. What follows is a profound surrender. He touches her with the devotion of a ruined man who just discovered religion. It is the poetic collision, two isolated souls, the snapping together to find clarity in the dark. Later tangled in the sheets, his steady heartbeat grounds them both. Discovering quiet peace in another person's arms proves we was never designed to face the harsh chaos of this world alone. Let's unpack this together, because the quiet shatters when Sebastian drops a startling truth. That dinner invitation from Seth was an orchestrated setup. Sebastian pushed another man to ask her out, desperately trying to force her away from his violent life. How often do we self-sabotage because we believe we are unworthy of something pure? He condemns his own cowardice, terrified to claim her. Yet, the second she accepted the date, consuming jealousy took over and he plotted to ruin it. Then the rival syndicate attacked, shifting his jealousy into a desperate fight for her survival. It is fascinating how the universe operates. When we stubbornly refuse to play our cards, fate forces the issue. If you avoid making the difficult choice, life will inevitably make it for you. He cups her face, apologizing for endangering her merely because he was paralyzed by his emotions. Stella gazes at this ruthless leader and offers a profound gift. She forgives him. However, this grace carries a heavy condition. The psychological games must end. The tests of her loyalty are over. If he desires her, he must fully commit and stop hiding his dark nature. Sebastian seals the vow with a kiss, swearing his absolute allegiance. They spend the hours burning through 2 years of repressed longing. As dawn breaks, Stella realizes her fate is irrevocably tied to his. The cold morning arrives with brutal speed, signaling the approaching council of crime lords. True commitment means stepping into the fiercest storms, standing united against whatever dangers wait outside. A tailor arrives bearing armor disguised as high fashion. The objective is visually enforce an undeniable truth. Stella is aligned with the sovereign of the underworld. She selects a striking emerald gown mirroring the heavy gemstones at her collarbone, stepping into heels sharp enough to command the room. Sebastian, during pride, gesture of crowning a queen. The battlefield is the shadowed back room of a corrupt wine exporter. Pushing the doors open, they face a dozen ruthless men who hold the city in their violent grip. Consider this piece of wisdom. True confidence is the strongest armor a person can possess. When you unapologetically claim your space and stand tall, even the dirt firefly monsters are forced to offer respect. We are about to witness a true shift in power. The room falls dead silent the moment Sebastian crosses the threshold with Stella to his side, projecting raw authority. He introduces her to the wolves as his future wife, dictating she now falls under the absolute protection of his lineage. You can almost hear the calculations ticking behind the eyes of these killers. By weaponizing their romance, Sebastian has draped her in invisible armor. A rival named Antonio slowly raises his glass in a hollow toast. The subordinates mirror the gesture. Stella catches the toxic glares lingering in the shadows. Remember this simple truth. People will frequently applaud your victories in public while harboring bitter resentment in private. Not everyone cheering actually wants to see you win. The empty leather chairs of the Calabrese faction echo with heavy doom. Sebastian refuses to waste a single second. His hand resting possessively on Stella's back, he informs the council that the Calabreses attempted to abduct his future wife. The heir leaves the room. This is no longer a petty dispute. It is a catastrophic violation of underworld law. The dim chamber fractures into terrified whispers. Every man there knows you never touch each patriarch's bloodline. Sebastian raises a hand, silencing the panic, and forces a ruthless vote. The Calabreses overplayed their hand, and now he demands their absolute ruin, carving up their territory for the loyalists. There is an enduring truth hidden in this dark tension. Reckless arrogance yields heavy consequences. Cross the wrong boundary and you permanently forfeit your seat at the table. You and I know dismantling an empire is never a clean strike. The vote is unanimous, erasing the ancient Calabrese lineage with a chilling show of raised hands. Their territory is tossed to the survivors like scraps. As the heavy doors seal shut, Sebastian tightens his iron grip on Stella's waist. They survived this opening skirmish, but the devastating war has only just begun. A syndicate never fades without exacting a toll of brutal retaliation. Yet surprisingly, Stella exudes a profound calmness as they exit the shadows. This brings us to the ultimate lesson regarding human connection. A true partnership does not mean fleeing from the flames. It means standing firmly within the roaring fire, shoulder to shoulder. Stepping out into the blinding sunlight, Sebastian pulls her close, pressing a quiet kiss to her temple. The heavy quiet settles like ash. This man, a tyrant who breaks kingdoms, does the unthinkable. His voice cracks as he thanks her. Stella tilts her head, the dim light catching her trembling smile as she asks why. His dark, weary eyes lock onto hers. He thanks her for having the nerve to choose his violent world. He offers no pretty lies. Paranoia and endless enemies await, yet his hand shakes as he brushes her cheek, swearing to prove she chose the right monster. Stella just smiles. She already knows. You and I know what this means. Tying your soul to a villain means accepting the shadows, but being fiercely worshipped. The lesson here is simple. Sometimes, finding exactly where you belong means having the courage to walk straight into the pitch black